Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Brooke Harrington with us today. We'll chat with Brooke in just a second. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. All right, so let's get into the big things of the week. I'm sitting here with Matty. Our cohort, Jen, is taking a much-needed little vacation. She'll be back next week. Let's start with the shutdown. As of this moment, we still don't have a final vote on what's going to happen with the GOP budget. The latest news was that Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democrats' minority leader, he went from being hell no to I'm going to vote for it. He cites all kinds of examples, like not voting for it would make it worse, give Trump more powers. And a lot of people on the left, both at home and in Washington, are really pissed off. There are people like AOC who are saying it's a betrayal, citing the fact that there are House Democrats who have run in very purple districts. Their seats are at risk. They're putting country before their own political fortunes, and they are standing up and saying no to this administration, and they are upset that Chuck Schumer and perhaps other senators that he's going to enlist on the Democratic side to join with him in helping pass this bill. What I've decided this morning is that it's not about this bill. It is not about this bill, because that's micro. The micro is what's in the bill, what's not in the bill. It doesn't matter. To me, what matters, and I've said this again and again, if Democrats truly believe the House is on fire, if they believe our democracy is not only being threatened, but it has months to live, as Senator Chris Murphy says, then voting no is resistance. Voting no is an opposition. Voting no is a roadblock. Voting no is saying, I am not going to help on any conceivable level a dictator wannabe destroy this democracy. Because voting yes kind of makes you feel like, business as usual. It's 2010. We won't win on this. We'll win on the other thing, and everything's going to be okay in the end. That doesn't strike me as, oh my God, the house is burning down, democracy's on fire, it's the end of the world as we know it. So this is, to me, the frustrating part. Democrats need to get their shit together. They need to decide, is he a dictator wannabe who's pushing us towards autocracy or not? Because if it is an existential threat to democracy, then I can't see how any Democrat would vote yes. And in the House, they all were uniformly voting no. So the House stood firm, stood together. Senate seems to be cracking.
I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like this is a giant betrayal of what the House did. It was completely unified. And to your point, normally, obviously, Democrats don't want the government to shut down in normal times. But this isn't normal times. This is an emergency. This is the only lever they have. And it would be one thing if they negotiated, and of course, there's no negotiation, but if there was, let's say, 30 days, then you'd be like, okay, continuing resolution for 30 days. You can't do too much more damage than you're already doing in 30 days. You keep the government open. But 6 months, that's an eternity right now. We're only 6 weeks or so into this administration, and they've already attacked every single part of our democratic republic. It's inconceivable that Chuck Schumer could change his mind on this. And I think it would be the biggest rift in the Democratic Party that we've seen in decades.
And to your point, and this is the other thing that really frustrates me, is does anyone really believe that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are going to do something or not do something based on whether this bill passes? I mean, seriously, again, if you truly believe that he is destroying democracy and we've got months of it left, that would indicate that you think he's breaking laws every day, he's shattering norms, he's moving us towards autocracy, and our rights and the Constitution, the rule of law are all going by the wayside. And so if that's the case, then he's already doing everything you fear he would do if this bill doesn't pass and the government shuts down. So why not stand up and do whatever you can? I don't understand it. But, I often don't understand how the Democrats show up to a gunfight with a feather.
I would just say that normally the Democrats seem to be all over the place. In this case, most Democrats, including the entire House and the majority of the Senate, seem to be on board with not letting this continuing resolution pass. It seems like Chuck Schumer is the one who is the most to blame for this. I mean, he's the one who came out and said, I'm going to vote for it. And it's shocking.
All right, let's shift to Trump. And it's hard these days to say Trump without also adding the word chaos. So let's play this clip.
As you know, we're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs. So whatever they charge us, we're charging them. Nobody can complain about that. Whatever it is, it doesn't even matter what it is. If they charge us 25 or 20% or 10% or 2% or 200%, then that's what we're charging them. And so I don't know why people get upset about that, because there's nothing more fair than that. I think a lot of the stock market going down was because of a really bad 4 years that we had. When you look at inflation and all of the other problems, wars and inflation and so many other problems. But we're going to have very good years. Department of Education's maybe more so than any other place, has a lot of people that can be cut. They're, number one, not showing up to work. Number two, they're not doing a good job. We have a dream, and you know what the dream is? We're going to move the Department of Education. We're going to move education into the states, so that the states, instead of bureaucrats working in Washington, so that the states can run education.
First of all, he's so transactional. Like, what is he talking about? They don't charge us anything, okay? Governments don't charge us. We don't charge governments. It all gets into importers and exporters, and ends up being the consumers who pay, who in a sense pay a tax no matter what country they live in. So it hurts the economies of either the foreign countries or the United States and the consumers that live in those countries. And this idiocy of blaming Biden for the stock market, really? Like, it was so horrible for 4 years. But interestingly, the stock market went to record levels during those 4 years. Like, he's the president. He took over a strong economy. He took over a record stock market. And in a month after he becomes president, the stock market tanks. And somehow it's Biden's fault when the stock market and the economy were humming during the Biden administration. But, you know, when you gaslight people and you spew propaganda nonstop, and half of the country sort of believes that the moon is made out of cheese, you know, there's a good chance that some of these people, or maybe most of them, will believe it. We know Trump always blames everyone except himself.
It's really interesting to watch, because there are definitely cracks forming, because everyone actually knows that this is total bullshit. All the business leaders who are biting their tongues know that this is insane, and their entire future of their businesses, if we're looking at a potential recession, the Russell 2000 is almost in bear territory. It's down 18%.
S&P is in correction territory.
Yeah. So, I mean, the notion that we could be in a recession because of this is incredibly possible. Like, it's going to almost more likely soon. And yet that'll be Biden's recession.
Well, but there are a lot of business leaders, a lot of people in the media, even Republicans that are criticizing what he's doing and speaking the truth. You know, the Wall Street Journal editorial board said that tariffs and trade wars are dumb. They even this week suggested that it's because of his threatened manhood. Yep. Because foreign nations won't take his nasty border taxes lying down. He gets pissed off and insecure. And we said from the beginning that this North American trade war is the dumbest in history, and we were being kind. That's a quote. Steve Leisman, who's CNBC's senior economics reporter, he's said the same thing. And he ties it to a disastrous geopolitical fiscal situation that is being created. Oklahoma Republican Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, when asked by CNN's Caitlin Collins if tariffs are a tax on consumers, he said, quote, "Of course it is. Everybody knows that." Illinois Republican Representative Darren LaHood, same thing, quote, "Tariffs are taxes on my constituents." These are not fees or tariffs paid by countries. They're paid by American importers who pass the incremental cost on to consumers. New York Times opinion columnist David French, sounding very similar to Optimistic Andy's The Gang That Can't Shoot Straight theory. Quote, "Incompetence may well be the thing even more than malice that undermines this administration, because it is very hard to avoid the effects of incompetence." So we're seeing nothing but chaos and incompetence. We're going to continue to see that. People are getting pissed off. The latest example of that was a town hall held by North Carolina Representative Chuck Edwards last night. People went ballistic. There were hundreds of people outside banging on the doors. They couldn't get in. That's how many people showed up. Inside, very MAGA-looking people were sounding very, very angry. And this is happening all across the country to the point where they're shutting down town halls. They're not. The RNC is advising its members not to hold town halls. And the spin from people like Speaker Mike Johnson and others is that these are paid Democratic protesters. This is the kind of thing that spawned the Tea Party, and they need to really watch what they're doing, because this is a revolt that doesn't go away with spin. It doesn't go away if you just lock the doors and don't have a town hall. It's building. I mean, what we saw last night was insane. I mean, I couldn't believe what I was watching. And again, in deep red territory. So as this is happening at town halls, people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Tim Walz, they are out in red districts. They are talking to the people, to Republicans. And I think they're really onto something. This is a strategy that, if continued, as the chaos and the incompetence continues out of Trump 2.0, as people continue to lose their federal jobs, as there's massive spending cuts to vital services, as the economy continues to tank and move towards recession, as the stock market tanks, as the retirement accounts start to be decimated, there's something brewing in this country right now that is really fascinating to watch. And it's interesting to see who on the left is rising to meet this challenge, to meet this moment in time. I think people on both sides of the aisle are listening to that message, and it's resonating. The other thing that's still happening, which is a cause for optimism, is the courts continue to hold up the rule of law and the Constitution. And yesterday we saw that a California U.S. District Judge, William Alsup, who ruled on the reversal of Trump's termination of probationary employees in the Veterans Affairs Department, Defense, Energy, Interior, Agriculture, Treasury. He ordered the administration to reinstate thousands of probationary employees who were fired last month. But the interesting thing is, this guy ripped them a new asshole. He went off the rails and literally just said, "You people suck. You lost. And don't do this shit in my courtroom ever again." Like, he cannot believe what was presented to him, what was said to him under oath that may not have been truthful, and he was livid. And so we are really not just seeing the courts in this country do the right thing. We're seeing that the courts and judges are expressing outrage.
Yes, they submitted written declarations and wouldn't come in to testify. So they actually withdrew the written declarations, because obviously if you submit something, you need to be able to have cross-examination. The judge is incredulous because it's insane. It brings back memories of when Rudy Giuliani was out in front saying insane things to judges, only this is a much more serious case.
Yeah, well, if you make a claim and then you refuse to show up in court to substantiate that claim, it really is an indication that you're filing frivolous motions, and judges don't like that. Judges like when people respect the courtroom and the rule of law. All right, let's get to our winners and losers.
My loser this week is Chuck Schumer for not having the foresight to let the government shut down. This is a further proof that the Democratic leadership needs to be replaced, and immediately. My winner is Mark Carney, Canada's new prime minister. Carney is likely the best choice for Canada to deal with Trump's brain-injured foreign policy.
My loser, Elon Musk, whose life and business empire seems to be crumbling before our eyes. My winner, Connecticut Congressman John Larson, who slammed Musk and his Republican colleagues after Musk's testimony was blocked before a hearing at the House Ways and Means Committee. And we have that clip.
Men and women on this committee are good people. They're honest and caring people. And that's why I do not understand why you would relegate this committee to no longer being of significance and resort to saying you will do whatever Elon Musk and Donald Trump tell you to do. Where's the independence of the committee? Where's the legislature? We're an equal branch of government. And you start off with a blather, and yet look at the empty seats here. Where's Elon Musk? I'm sure he's a genius and is a very credible person because of the wealth he's accumulated. But that does not put him above the law or the responsibility to come before this committee in this Congress. If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he's found are so eminent, why isn't he here explaining it? You know why. Because he's out to privatize Social Security. He's been on television the last couple of days talking exactly about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and what he intends to do. Privatize it. Because Elon Musk thinks that this is the best thing to do. President Trump is calling Social Security a scam. Elon Musk, as the chairman, as Mr. Neal said, called it a Ponzi scheme. The Congress is in our back pocket. We don't even have to come before them and testify because we control the House, we control the Senate, and we control the presidency. And it's the tyranny of the executive. It's why these resolutions were first adopted back in 1789, because the founding fathers knew that the executive branch does not have total authority over the legislature unless you have a willing party that says, no, we're going to do exactly what you tell us to do, Mr. Musk and Mr. President. It doesn't matter to our constituents. It doesn't matter how much money they are not going to receive. We're not even going to tell them the truth about what's going to happen to them. They administer to over 70 million people in the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly and children. Shame! Shame! Can't bring people in front of this body? If he's right, if they're so good, if they're so just, why aren't they here telling the American people about it? They're not, because you know the truth. It's about privatization.
Bravo, Congressman. And we wish more people like John Larson would stand up in that venerable House and say similar things. Which gets us to the weekly rant. Over the past couple of weeks, both Democrats and Republican voters have been given an even clearer window into the pathologically lying, sociopathic, gaslighting mind of Donald Trump. So here's 5 stunning, indisputable examples of his dishonesty, delusion, incompetence, corruption, and chaos. Let's start with his claim at his State of the Union address that there are people, 150 to 360 years old, who continue to receive Social Security checks, citing this phenomenon as an example of the fraud he believes exists within this massive entitlement program. Well, just stop for a second. If someone has been receiving Social Security checks for that long, then they also had to have been receiving them during Trump's first term as well. So why didn't he do anything about it then, when he had 4 years to put a stop to this alleged fraud? Think about it. Next, Trump is imposing huge tariffs on Canada and Mexico because he claims the trade agreement with them is terrible and unfair. Well, guess who got rid of NAFTA and replaced it with USMCA, the current trade agreement? He did. It's his agreement. Think about it. Trump also this week said if you protest outside Tesla showrooms, you're a, quote, domestic terrorist. Okay, so you're a domestic terrorist if you exercise your constitutional rights of public assembly and free speech, but if you scale the walls of the Capitol, smash windows and break in, beat the shit out of cops, piss and shit all over the place and destroy and steal property, you're a patriot. Think about it. Worse, Trump also this week held a live Tesla infomercial at the White House, featuring several vehicles, handheld notes on models and pricing, while begging consumers to support his embattled co-president, Elon Musk, the richest human being on earth, who he whined is being, quote, treated so unfairly. Trump even claimed he's bought a Tesla himself as a show of support for the poor little victimized Musk. but there's actually no evidence of that purchase. Perhaps it'll come in 2 weeks, like everything else Trump promises. Lastly, though he's been president for almost 2 months now, he's blaming the current stock market crash on President Biden, not his chaotic, ever-changing tariffs and trade wars, which have created massive uncertainty on Wall Street and Main Street, which now threaten recession and a collapse of the economy. He told reporters this week, quote, "I think a lot of the stock market going down was because of the really bad 4 years that we had." Think about it. I believe Americans of all political persuasions are beginning to see through this Trump bullshit and the chaos and destruction it's causing. We see that in his polling. We see it in the angry Republican town halls. We see it in his desperate attempts to help a flailing Musk. And we see it in the fallout over his pointless, unprovoked tariffs and trade wars, unnecessarily being waged against our closest allies. So I'm going to continue saying this over and over again. Trump is leading the gang that can't shoot straight, and it's his gross incompetence and chaos that will ultimately save us all. All right, let's get to Brooke Harrington. She is Professor of Economic Sociology at Dartmouth College. Her most recent book is Offshore, Stealth Wealth and the New Colonialism, which the Financial Times named one of the best books of 2024. The New Yorker also highlighted it among the political books that help us make sense of 2024. Brooke's previous book on offshore finance, Capital with Borders, Wealth Managers, and the 1%, won an Outstanding Book Award from the American Sociological Association, and she is a frequent op-ed contributor to the New York Times and the Washington Post, as well as to the Guardian and the Atlantic. Brooke, welcome into the back room.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So your latest book is Offshore, Stealth Wealth and the New Colonialism. Tell us about the book and how it relates to what we're seeing in today's politics in America under Donald Trump as he moves towards autocracy and a Russia-ish oligarchy.
Yeah, well, the thing about Russia is it is an old imperial power that is still trying to act like an imperial power. So that's what the annexation of Ukraine is about, with all the weird ideology about, how they're actually no Ukrainians, they're just kind of lesser Russians,
Right.
Or failed Russians, and how Putin occasionally makes noises about annexing other parts of former Soviet territory. He's an imperialist, and essentially what the Broligarchs are doing, and by that I mean,
I love that term, by the way.
yeah,
I'm going to talk about that in a minute.
the people who are largely responsible for putting Trump in office because they dug deep into their pockets and they pushed a loser over the finish line, a guy who was probably going to lose the election. They ensured with, hundreds of millions of dollars of their own money that he would win. Elon Musk is not the only one. He's just the most prominent one. And these are guys who are billionaires from the high-tech industry or finance. And they're unlike oligarchs of other countries and of previous times in the US because they have this very distinctive anti-democratic ideology. And one of the many noxious things they want to do is to replace democracy, not just with corporate rule with them at the head, but with a kind of neo-colonial model in which instead of representing a country and its empire, the empire is going to be theirs personally, which is also a thing that has existed in history. In the Victorian era, 200 years ago, buccaneers would just show up on some island in the South Pacific and say, "I claim this in my name. I'm your king now." And sometimes like the British warships would back them up and say, "Okay, we'll let you be king of Borneo," or whatever. But the Broligarchs and their ilk have been piloting this idea in the offshore financial world for at least 50 years. And by the way, it's always failed. It's always crashed and burned horribly. But that hasn't stopped them. These guys have so much money that nobody sort of confronts them with reality, saying like, your ideas are stupid. They are never going to work. Just get a hobby, man. Find something else to do. But to this day, Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, who were major backers of Trump, they're financing these like Bitcoin cities and libertarian experiments where There's no courts, there's no judiciary, there's no constitution. If you want to live there, you sign a contract with a corporation. You agree to arbitration for every dispute. And in return for a low tax rate, you live in an autocracy governed by them, which is just kind of a 21st century reboot of what the empire by private contract buccaneers were doing 200 years ago.
Well, the Trump administration is full of billionaires, both in the cabinet, but also the Broligarchs, as you refer to them. Perhaps the most powerful in the government right now is Elon Musk. How dangerous is what he's doing, not just to the federal budget and the workforce, but more importantly, to our democracy and the drastic changes to how America's been typically governed?
Did you see the images of Trump in front of the White House hawking Teslas the other day, like he was a late night infomercial salesman hawking the Bassomatic or Ginsu knives?
Mm-hmm. I ran to the phone and bought one. I mean, I hate to admit that.
Don't price it yet.
He's Ron Popeil.
I don't think he's as successful as Ron Popeil. He's like
Touche.
He's great
Yeah.
value, Ron Popeil. And now he's president.
Yeah.
But for weeks now, I've been saying Trump is president in name only.
Yeah.
Musk is the president. And
Mhm.
I think I wasn't privy to their private conversations, but just observing what's happened, it appears that they had a conversation at some point last fall where Musk said, look, you're going to lose unless you get like a massive infusion of money. I can give that to you, but I want to run things day to day. I want to do what I want to do with the federal government. And Trump, who probably never wanted to be president anyways, who's only interested in the White House because it'll keep him out of prison and it will allow him to prosecute his grievances against his many enemies.
Mhm. And grift.
And grift.
Mhm.
I think it sounded like a pretty good deal to Trump. Like he would be the figurehead, the chairman of the board, so to speak, cut the ribbons, fire everybody at the Kennedy Center board and make himself the chairman, but
Mhm.
actually let someone else do the real work. So what I observe is that Trump now essentially works for Musk, and that's why he's out there flogging Musk's product on the White House driveway, which is,
Mhm.
if I had read that in a satirical novel, I would have been like, oh man, that's a bridge too far. That would never.
Yeah. Even Trump wouldn't do that.
Exactly. Even Trump wouldn't do that.
Mhm.
But, like, frankly, I think we ain't seen nothing yet. We're going to be saying Trump did that over and over again because Musk is making him, he's flogging him like a show pony saying, keep me rich.
Well, that's interesting. And to play armchair psychologist for a second, I always try to analyze Trump through the lens of his brain, because if I do it through my brain, I end up banging my head into the wall because that lens consists of logic and reasoning. So if you're Trump, yes, everything you're saying makes logical sense, unless perhaps you're a sociopath. And despite everything that was promised to you and everything you agreed to, you cannot stand not being the boss. So I wonder, unless he's had some kind of serious id shift in the last 6 months, can he really coexist with Musk on the level that you're describing, where he's just happy to play second fiddle? Has Donald Trump ever played second fiddle to anyone or on anything?
No. And I see where you're coming from, and I freely admit that I have great difficulty placing myself in the shoes of a sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
Fiona Hill, who's a diplomat in the first Trump
Mhm.
administration,
Mm-hmm.
she just gave an interview where she said she would be present for conversations between Putin and Trump, in which Putin would openly make fun of Trump and mock him and goad him. And Trump was so dumb, he didn't realize it was happening.
Yeah.
So my theory of the case is that while, yes, Trump is unlikely to be happy about playing second fiddle to anyone, he is vulnerable to being manipulated by people who can say, oh, you're such a good boy. You're such a big, strong president. Look at those muscly muscles.
And that
That
beautiful
makes-
mane of orange hair.
Yes. Oh, you're so lovely and masculine. Um, I think he's very vulnerable to people who can skillfully manipulate him into thinking that he's in charge when Musk is just running rings around him. And in fact, making Trump do things that are that ought to be below even his dignity, like hawking Teslas in the White House driveway.
Yeah. You're right. He does. It's like people say, the last person who gets to him at the end of the day is what he believes the next morning. We know that the cabinet, that the senior Trump aides, they hate Musk. They're humiliated by him publicly. We saw that on TV live a week ago. We also know that Steve Bannon probably still has his ear. We also know that Trump's polling is tanking, the stock market's tanking, consumer confidence is tanking, the economy is about to crash. He's admitting to recession potential. I wouldn't be surprised if Bannon is in his ear chipping away going, sir, the people love you. You're the one they love. You're their favorite president. And before Musk, you were so popular. Everything was great. He's the guy. He's the one. He's got to go. We know that Trump never takes blame. We know that Trump has to scapegoat someone. We know from his first term that there's going to be massive turnover. So we know that kind of personnel turmoil is coming. And so it just seems like there's fertile landscape at some point when the shit starts to get too thick for him to go, I had to let him go. I mean, he does that with everybody. First, they're great, and then they're awful. It's because of him. Everything sucks. I mean, you can almost hear the speech.
I can't stand his voice. Like, I have to turn it off. It comes on the radio. Oh God, no, it's like fingernails on the back floor. But you do a very good Trump. Congratulations.
Well, I've been trying, but I just feel like there's got to be those forces saying to him, this guy is trouble. I mean, look at what he's trying to do to help him, to your point, selling his cars, calling him a victim. I mean, come on, the world's richest human being. We were supposed to feel sorry for this guy because he's being treated so unfairly. So you see all these little things happening that in and of themselves aren't like raising any typical flags. But if you put them all together and you realize it's only 7 weeks, like what is going to happen 2 months from now? We know nothing's getting better. We know the chaos isn't going to suddenly dissipate. We know he's not suddenly going to become presidential and be the man of the people, right? We know it's only going to get worse. More town halls, more angry people, Republican voters. So something's going to have to give. I just see the bus. I see Musk under it. It would be classic Trump.
Unless there is some factor here that neither of us know about. And I infer that there might be, because I observe that there are only 2 or 3 people in the whole world Trump never, ever criticizes.
Mm-hmm.
Putin,
Mm-hmm.
Xi of China,
Mm-hmm.
and now Musk. And that strikes me as very alarming, because at least in the case of Putin, there's reason to believe he has compromat or blackmail material on Trump.
The PP tape.
Right. And honestly, I think it's got to be something worse at this point, because Trump is so cowed. Like, remember that infamous photo of him kind of slumped and stunned looking, standing in Helsinki next to Putin, who has this cat who ate the canary grin?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that has been so shocking to me about Trump's appearances in public with Musk has been how passive he's been, letting Musk hold court in front of the press corps, and silent and hunched over. He has that same hunched posture of a beaten dog that Trump had with Putin. And I'm like, uh-oh, what has Musk got on Trump? It can't just be that he bought the presidency. Like, I hope that I will live long enough to learn the story of what actually happened behind the scenes. Somebody will spill the beans someday. Maybe we'll get a partial story. But I don't see that Trump is the same guy as he was between 2016 and 2020. That guy cared a lot about his popularity and about the Dow.
Yeah.
Like, that guy's gone now. He's like, yeah, there's going to be some pain and the market's going to go down. Eat it, suckers. And like, who is this man? Where's Trump?
Right. Well, see, that's where I tend to sort of be like, right, that's the part that doesn't make sense. There's something else going on, but I don't know. In the absence of some real compromise, which I don't know. I mean, what could that be? The man said I could kill somebody, and everybody's like, "What did that baby must have really pissed him off?" Like what could he possibly do? Even to your point about the pee tape, like the MAGA base would be like, "Yeah, who doesn't like to get peed on?" Like, there's nothing he can do, in my opinion, that a certain percentage of his base, and that's the key, a certain percentage, the people who feel like Joe Biden was never really the president because he was in Gitmo and John F. Kennedy Jr. was the actual president, that crowd, they'll believe anything. But the other 5, 10, 15% who helped him get elected, the critical people who may have voted for Obama or Biden and just wanted some disruption, like that crowd, the crowd that's storming, Chuck Edwards town hall last night, like, I don't know. I think there is stuff that could hurt him. The N word. I mean, what could it be that people would be like, wow, I can't believe he did that. Like literally, there's nothing. If I said to you, Trump just punched a baby in the face, you would not go, oh my God, I can't believe Trump did that. You'd be like, well, all right. That's Trump. Like, and that's the world we're living in right now. So I don't know, but I mean, do you think the bromance with Musk is long lived, or do you see a shelf life to it?
I'm not sure there is a bromance. I think there's a transaction that has occurred behind the scenes. And what I observed in the Oval Office when Musk was holding court with the White House press corps and Trump was sort of slumped and snarling over his desk while Musk's 4-year-old was picking his nose and like saying whatever to him.
And telling Trump to fuck off. Like, I mean,
yeah.
That was like the greatest moment ever in Oval Office history.
And Trump sat there and took it. Again, who is this man? Is this a pod person? Because this is not the Donald Trump we all know and hate. Because he wouldn't have sat there and taken that. But he sat there and took it. So I'm
yeah, you might be right.
This is where I really hit my own limitations in terms of my difficulty putting myself into his shoes. So it may not be that he's thinking, what will turn the base against me? But it could be. It could be like evidence that he paid for multiple abortions. I wouldn't be shocked if he did that. And that would turn maybe a portion of his true believers against him. But some of them, I'm sure, would still go, oh, we all make mistakes.
Right.
It might be something instead that is just so personally meaningful and humiliating to Trump that he can't let it get out. Like maybe it's that cheating to win the election or something. A guy named Nikolai Patrushev, who's a Putin aide, about a week after the election, on November 12th, 2024, made a comment to a Russian newspaper in which he said, well, Donald Trump knows that he owes certain obligations.
Yeah, I remember that.
For his win, and that he is expected to come through on those obligations. And later on, Patrushev also leaked comments to the press about how, gosh, wouldn't it be a shame if Trump were assassinated? Gosh darn it, he's so vulnerable.
Yeah, that was startling. Yeah.
So, maybe that's why when Putin or Musk say dance monkey dance, Trump swallows his pride and dances, because maybe he's afraid of death. Maybe he's afraid of some form of exposure that wouldn't seem world ending to us. Like, okay, he cheated on an election. That sucks. That's bad. You should go to prison. But like, that would be a mortal blow to Trump.
Yeah, you can almost imagine, like, even if they were to threaten him with the safety of his children, his response would be like, oh, are we talking Ivanka or Eric?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
if it's just Ivanka, okay.
I'll toss him in as a freebie.
Yeah. So Broligarchy or Broligarch, is that your term? Did you coin that, or is that out there?
I wish that I had, but when I started writing about it in end of July, beginning of August of 24, I had just seen it like on Twitter. I will never call it the other name.
Me neither.
And I actually looked it up. Being a good academic, I like to cite my sources. So I just did a little search on Twitter, like Broligarch. And I found sources going all the way back to 2016 from people with small accounts, people I'd never heard of. So I don't know where it came from. But its moment has come.
Yeah. And to continue playing armchair psychologist here, is toxic faux masculinity and crippling insecurity a requirement of a Broligarch?
Apparently, I mean, look at what happened to Jeff Bezos.
Oh
Like,
my God.
He used to be a
Castrated.
fairly normal looking person.
hmm
And now he's like this roided out G.I. Joe.
He's living the dream, whatever that is.
He's living somebody's dream. It's
his,
not
his,
going to be
his
mine.
dream. Yeah, his dream. And are we destined to see the Trump oligarchy gain even more power in control of government? Or do you see at some point a crash and burn?
That is a really good question. I mean, historically, what has happened whenever these guys have tried to build their little private empires offshore, it has always crashed and burned. It has taken several years, though. So I hope that won't be the case in the United States, because if they do to the US what they've done to like little islands and post-colonial states in the South Pacific and Latin America, the destruction to the world economy is going to be immense, to say nothing of what it means to Americans. They basically just carpet bomb these places' economies and their governments, and then walk away saying like, oh, well, time to try again somewhere else. You can't really do that with the country that has the world's largest nuclear arsenal and which produces the world's reserve currency, the US dollar, because that's going to have massive ripple effects everywhere. I hope, I'm not super optimistic now that Dems are talking about voting for the continuing resolution and aiding and abetting Musk and Doge and Trump in their destruction. As we speak right now, that vote is being held. And I hope some of the Dems held the line and, basically called the Republicans bluff. But if they cave on this one, that's basically saying Congress effectively ceases to exist as a separate power and a check and balance.
What I've been trying to do, and the budget bill is part of my thinking, is to just focus on the macro, not the micro. The micro to me would be like, what's in the bill, what's not in the bill. The macro is our democracy in danger of being destroyed and disappearing? If Democrats truly feel that is where we are headed, then that should be the only reason to vote no. Is the guy destroying democracy or not? If he is, then you got to do whatever is humanly possible to stop him, because acquiescence and capitulation are not going to save democracy. Putting up a roadblock, resistance, showing the people at home that you are resisting and you are fighting, that may do it. I mean, is there anyone who thinks Trump is or isn't going to do whatever the hell he wants to do with or without this bill? Right? I mean, haven't we seen in the last 2 months, he is rolling over our democracy, our constitution, the rule of law, every norm, boundary. So this bill has nothing to do with that. It is not going to stop him or not stop him. What it's going to do is show that we're not just going to lie down and say, go ahead, do whatever you want, sir.
Exactly. And I'm very surprised and disappointed that Democratic leadership, for the most part, doesn't seem to recognize that. Like some do. Even some Republican leaders seem to recognize it. But what's missing is leadership that can make them coalesce into a meaningful bloc to stop Trump. And the courts are doing their part as best they can, but Trump is ignoring court orders. He's basically saying, well, your judgment isn't worth the paper it's written on. Make me. And since Trump controls, or under the executive branch are like the U.S. Marshals and the enforcement mechanism, he's basically saying, you can't make me. I own the people who would enforce your judgments. So write what you want. I'm not doing it.
And that is the ultimate constitutional crisis that everyone keeps talking about and fearing. But, like with these rulings this week about having to rehire across 6 agencies all the probationary workers, we'll see if they get rehired, because that would be on some level an indication that he does have to obey the courts. But it is scary. Even the notion of a U.S. president saying, screw you, I'm not going to listen to you on anything is really dangerous. So right now we're seeing a battle of the billionaires play out in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election, which is April 1st. We have Musk on the right. We have George Soros on the left. Call it the Broligarch versus the nonagenariarch. Okay, I just made that up. Is this what American politics has become, where like two of the richest people in the world get to decide who runs the government, who sits on a Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, the oligarchs are playing American democracy like it's a board game, like it's Monopoly. And, Musk and Soros are battling over Park Place.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the framers' worst nightmare. Chapter 2 of my new book, Offshore, is all about sort of the history of where these Broligarchs come from and what they believe. And in order to sort of frame that or put that in context, I write about, well, when the United States was being created, people like Thomas Jefferson and his friend, the philosopher Thomas Paine, sat down and said, well, look, what do we want to avoid? And what they wanted to avoid was this. So back when they were writing, the only way to be wealthy was to own land. So one of the first things Thomas Jefferson said is we have to outlaw titles of nobility and these legal processes by which big landed wealthy families pass down their wealth generation to generation, undivided to the eldest son. And those rules are called primogeniture. That's where the eldest son gets everything. And entailment. And that's where if you have a big landed estate, you can't divide it up into smaller pieces and sell it off. Because if you allow that, then the family's dynastic wealth dissipates over time. And pretty soon, by generation 3 or 4, you're not rich anymore. So in England, that's what made the nobility. So Jefferson and Paine were like, right, we're not doing that. It's against the law. Thomas Paine wanted to put a 100% tax on inheritance. And if we had done that, we wouldn't be looking at some of the Broligarchs we see now, because, people like Bezos, for example, they were able to create companies like Amazon and become billionaires, in part through the largesse of the American taxpayer, building the whole e-commerce world on the taxpayer-funded DARPANET, which became the Usenet, which became the World Wide Web. That was all a taxpayer-funded public good that got privatized. The guys who founded Google, like Sergey Brin, they got National Science Foundation grants as graduate students at Stanford to do the research that became Google, which they then privatized to become billionaires. So someone like Thomas Paine would have said, okay, that's great. Thank you for inventing those things, but you don't get to pass that down to your heirs. And you have to pay back society for all the taxpayer investment that made it possible for you to be prosperous. Well, we don't do that anymore. And that's why we have wealth inequality that exceeds that of the Gilded Age. It's become unsustainable. And that's why we have, instead of actual democracy in Wisconsin, we have, rock'em sock'em robots with Soros on one side, Elon Musk on the other. That's not democracy anymore.
No. You tweeted last night a warning that after Trump tanks the economy, he's going after the U.S. dollar globally so he can eventually tie our government to crypto. What does that all mean, and why is that dangerous?
Well, by the way, it wasn't on Twitter. It was on Blue Sky. I noped out on Twitter several months ago. I couldn't take it anymore.
My bad.
So the thing is, if you remember about a year ago, Trump was still vehemently anti-crypto. He was out in public saying crypto is a scam. Don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And then by June, he was giving keynote speeches at crypto conferences. Like, what happened? And apparently what happened is the crypto bros, who are a subset of the Broligarchs, gave him a lot of money that helped push him over the finish line in the election. And in return, he agreed to use the power of the U.S. government to exchange their monopoly money for actual U.S. dollars. Now, why would those guys want to see the dollar weaken in any way? If you remember what happened in 2008, when global markets crashed and everybody lost tons of money, including rich people. About 2 years after the crash, rich people started to get a lot richer at an accelerated pace. So they came out of the crisis something like 30% richer than they went in. It took like 2 or 3 years. But what happened was they were the ones who had cash on hand, where everyone else, like middle class people, upper middle class people, and of course, poor people, they were losing their houses, or if they still had any property, they were selling at deeply discounted prices. So oligarchs with cash on hand recognized that this was an opportunity to buy everything on massive sale. So I was talking to wealth managers at that time, and they were saying, yeah, my client got a great deal on a department store chain. Again, like it's a monopoly game. People's lives and their life's work can just be bought up for a song. So I think that the crypto bros were trying to solve 2 problems with Donald Trump. They wanted to get a guy in office who would agree to swap their scam fake currency for real currency. And B, they wanted someone who would actively help them provoke what's known as disaster capitalism, which is a practice of creating crises on purpose in order to artificially drive down prices so you can buy up a bunch of stuff at discount, knowing that it will later go up. I think that might be the play, although it remains to be seen.
And how does this tie to what he announced a couple of weeks ago about the U.S. government creating like a Bitcoin reserve? And it seems like it kind of fizzled. Bitcoin had a bounce like the day he announced it. What is his end game with this? Like, is there any sound fiscal logic or principles involved here that would actually, on any conceivable level, be good for the country? Or is it just a scam?
No. And it's not even a scam that benefits Trump. I think that this is a consequence of him selling the presidency to the Broligarchs, because part of that deal, I believe, was he agreed to use the power of the federal government as like the ultimate marketing platform. And that's what we're seeing right now with the selling Teslas in the White House driveway. So one of the things to realize about the Broligarchs is they're not just anti-democracy. They're anti-capitalist. And this is a point that I think really gets lost. 11 years ago, Peter Thiel published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal titled, Competition is for Losers. And, competition is allegedly the centerpiece of capitalism, creative destruction, and so forth. So he's like, no. What we should be aiming for is monopoly. And that is actually what you see in their business practices. They don't really care if they're producing a product that anybody wants. What they want to do is enforce monopolies on us. And so what is the US government doing now? Embracing AI. Like Musk wants to use AI instead of human beings to do air traffic control, and embracing crypto. Those are political projects that are wrapped in a disguise of technology. And the thing is, the free market has rejected both of them. AI is not making money. In fact, it's losing money hand over fist. It's a technology that is only possible through mass theft of intellectual property, other people's intellectual property. Crypto has been flogged for decades. Basically, the free market doesn't want it. Now, in a normal capitalist system, what's supposed to happen is that the business people behind those efforts are supposed to go, well, back to the drawing board.
Right.
Time to invent something else. But instead, what they're trying to do is they've bought the federal government and they're saying, we're going to ram this down Americans' throats and force you to accept it by welding AI and crypto into the federal government, which is the ultimate gravy train. Because, the federal government generally pays its bills on time, unlike private contracts. We hope that the federal government won't go bankrupt. So one way to keep your shitty technology and your shitty product that nobody wants profitable and pay yourself off for the big stupid investment that you've made is to force the federal government to pay you for it. So first, let's force the federal government to buy our crypto bags and exchange them for real US dollars that have actual value. And then let's maybe make it so that if you want a rapid refund on your tax returns, you have to accept it in crypto. Maybe grandma doesn't know what crypto is. Maybe you don't know what crypto is. But if you want to see that refund within 6 months, you got to take it in crypto. So I think that is the kind of thing that Musk and the crypto bros are trying to do. They're embedding themselves like ticks in the skin of Uncle Sam and just like sucking out those sweet benefits and exclusive contracts so that they will stay rich at the expense of everyone else. And no, that's not good for America. It's not even good for Trump, but I think he has sold himself as the ultimate marketer, and in return for staying out of prison and getting to practice his grift and pretend to be president.
And can this even be accomplished? I mean, the reserve that he announced, apparently the government can't own any crypto unless it's seized by drug dealers, et cetera, et cetera. Is this more of just bluster where he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about?
I think he has absolutely no idea what the hell he's saying about crypto or even what crypto is or how it works. But he believes that he could sell coal in Newcastle or ice to the Inuit, and
or cars on the White House lawn.
Exactly. And so he has been flattered, I believe, into saying, you could sell anything, Mr. Trump. You're the greatest of all time. So, go out there and sell this shitty product. Like Trump steaks, Trump water, Trump towers. He has decades of experience selling shitty products to people and somehow, collecting enough money to make it worthwhile to do the next one. So he understands this game. But absolutely not. He doesn't understand anything about what he's selling. You know how photographers keep capturing Trump going out in front of cameras with a little tiny list on white paper with, big clear handwriting and black lettering with his talking points? That's probably how every single thing he says about crypto goes down. Someone hands him his little bullet points and he walks out there and he says some like marginally coherent things about it. And then he walks off stage left, having given his performance, but understanding nothing of what he's saying. However, the sham nature of his performance, hawking crypto or whatever, doesn't mean he can't do terrible damage.
Right.
The people who are giving him the script are deeply un-American. They're hostile to everything this country stands for. They're perfectly happy to crash the market and cost many of us our life savings and, many people their jobs. They don't care. So he's following their orders, and that's what's dangerous here.
So you wrote a New York Times column about 2 weeks ago titled "Trump is like FDR, only in reverse." Great title. What do you mean?
It occurred to me several weeks ago that the incredibly rapid pace with which Trump allowing Musk to dismantle the federal government reminded me of FDR's first 100 days, but if you ran the film backwards. Because, remember when FDR took office, many people thought the U.S. was on the brink of collapse or perhaps socialist revolution. At that point, the Bolshevik Revolution was only 15 years in the rearview mirror. And Eugene V. Debs was touring the United States trying to foment a workers' revolution. The bonus army had camped out in front of the White House demanding the benefits they'd been promised as World War I veterans. And Hoover had basically said, get stuffed. So revolution was a real thing. And everyone was glad that FDR came along and kind of stabilized the economy and the politics of the U.S. And he was super smart about doing that because he realized that his real enemy was fear. And that's why he had that first fireside chat in which he said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And he did that to prevent more runs on the banks. And apparently after that fireside chat, lots of people who had been prepared to pull all their money out and say a bunch of Hail Marys actually put money back in the banks. He managed their fear and he restored public trust in institutions. So what Trump is doing, instead of building institutions and restoring public trust, is he's destroying institutions and destroying public trust. So everything that Franklin Roosevelt did at the pace that Franklin Roosevelt did it with the cooperation of Congress, Trump is doing in reverse without the cooperation of Congress or with the complicity of a passive Congress.
Yeah, it's really staggering in scale and scope and the impact of it, when you think about it, and especially when you compare those two presidents in how they have either inspired or terrified the electorate. My last question, I always try to end on a positive note. I've been saying this now for weeks, and a lot of people much smarter than me are starting to echo the same sentiment. So I have this theory, this belief that the Trump administration, Trump himself, this is the gang that can't shoot straight. And that given enough time and enough rope, they will hang themselves through gross incompetence and chaos. We see so much of that already. And that's what may ultimately save us. Now, here's your chance to slap me like Cher in Moonstruck and say, snap out of it, libtard.
Never, never. No, I think that you're right. And the question is, will the damage they've done, can it be fixed? And this is the problem that really haunts me, because when you fire hundreds of thousands of federal workers and you strip universities of funding, people make irrevocable life decisions. Like, there are academics, leading world scientists right now who are saying, you know what? I'm done here. I'm going to Europe or something to be a scientist, because they're not going to screw around with me. They're going to fund my research, and I can just live my life and raise my family and not be jerked around like this. Because, we already survived one Trump administration. We barely got out of that one alive. And, a million and a half of us didn't get out of it alive. It's not easy to move continents and to move countries. I've done it myself multiple times. And, if you're a really established, like, Nobel Prize level scientist, if you pick up your family and you leave the United States, you are probably not coming back ever. And so one of the things that concerns me that is particularly close to my heart is the brain drain that's going to happen as a result of these antics, as it were, of the gang who can't shoot straight. Because the damage of driving the world's leading scientists out of the United States, where they came to be the best scientists they could be, because we offered the best scientific advancement environment in the world. Why should anyone trust us again? Why should people from foreign countries come here to make their lives? Knowing that, if American voters decide to be stupid again, maybe they're going to be the ones with the green cards who get arrested and detained and deported by whoever the next Donald Trump might be. How are they ever going to know that we've learned our lesson? The Five Eyes countries who share intelligence with us, it's protected us from countless terrorist attacks on American soil. Why would they ever share intelligence with us again? Short of massive changes to our electoral system that would prevent someone like Trump from rising to the White House ever again, we put that man in office twice. And I'm afraid that the work of rebuilding the trust that's necessary for America to prosper won't be the work of 4 years or even 10 years, but maybe a couple generations.
Yeah. Well, my team calls me Optimistic Andy. And so my response would be to cite the cyclical nature of politics. We did have a Trump term once before, and it was dangerous. It was a farce. We were humiliated on the global stage. Then we had Joe Biden, and he did a pretty good job rebuilding most, if not all of that, strengthening NATO, building and expanding our coalition in the European Union, et cetera. So I guess one has to just hope that, as bad as this may be, to your point, that if we're given the opportunity of having a democracy to rebuild from, that it could be done and will be done. Because this is, America, and we've been through so much in our 248 years, but we've never been experiencing anything like this before. So it really does make you wonder, can we survive this term like we did the last one? And if so, how bad will the damage be? But I guess we all just got to stay positive, and do the best we can and vote,
I do have one positive, optimistic thing to say, and I'm not an optimist by nature. So take that as a bit of context. What strikes me as most extraordinary about this moment that I've never seen before in my memory of American politics, which goes back to the Ford administration, I find myself in agreement with people I would never have anything in common with normally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was reading David Brooks today, and I disagree with David Brooks on a lot of things, vehemently.
Me too.
But he wrote something today about the trust and reputation that Trump is ruining. And I'm like, yeah, I'm on the same page with David Brooks, and I'm on the same page on some very important things with Federalist Society member George Conway. And I don't know if he's still, but he was at one point.
Sure. Bill Kristol. I mean, there are a lot of people, and a lot of these guys have been on my show, and we've talked about that, how Trump unwittingly did serve as a uniter. He united us against him. People that we would never, ever have sat and talked with or been friends with or agreed with politically, to your point. We're now, where it matters, on the same page. And that does give us hope, because that's what helped defeat him in 2020.
What I hope for is that some leader, some grassroots organizer can make this kind of potential energy of a broad coalition who actually does believe in democracy, who believes, for example, that the Department of Education should continue to exist.
Right.
And that, the IRS should have enforcement capacity, and that Congress should maintain the power of the purse. There are a lot of us who believe that. And I think there are more of us than there are of people who support Trump and the Broligarchs.
Mm-hmm.
What we're lacking is something to coalesce around. And it may not take the form of like marches on Washington. Maybe it'll take some other form. But right now, it's just potential energy of this broad-based coalition. But what I want to see is all of us come together and do something as people who can reclaim the concept of patriotism and rebuild America on a stronger footing, so that someone like Trump can never get within a country mile of power again.
Yeah, I think in 3 to 6 months, we're going to see a much different America, or a much different electorate than we are seeing now. I think we're at the start of something, some kind of serious resistance and revolt that's going to come not just from Democrats, but Republicans, moderate Republicans, and independents. It just seems like it's unavoidable that we're heading to that point where the pushback that this administration is going to get from all sides is increasing. So expect the worst, hope for the best, right?
Right.
Brooke, great conversation. Thanks for coming on. Hope you'll come back again.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much.
All righty. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. We're going to take another call from our friend Colton Blue. Colton, welcome back to the back room.
Thanks for having me.
So it's been a wild and crazy week on Wall Street. The markets are in correction territory now. How you feeling about that? You got a retirement savings account?
Well, yeah. Well, I did. Yeah, I did. It's been wiped out. Joe Biden screwed the economy up.
You're blaming this on Biden?
He was such a disaster for the United States economy that now Trump's trying to fix it back up, but he's got to go through all this hell to do it. He's picking up the pieces left over from that old fool. They propped up fake numbers to make everybody vote for him, but it was all a bunch of crap.
But how do you explain the fact that the stock market was roaring right up until inauguration, and now he's president for almost 2 months, and the markets are tanking, and you don't think it has to do with his tariffs and trade wars? You're actually blaming it on Joe Biden?
Well, they were just putting up those numbers. They weren't real. That was just to win an election.
The stock market numbers weren't real?
That's right. Look, the deep state extends to the stock markets. They manipulate stuff. Now they're trying to hurt Trump with it. And so now they're trying to make the genius businessman look like he's terrible with the economy, but it's the deep state, and he's got to get them all out of there. He's got to root them out. That's what he's doing.
Who's in the deep state?
Oh, all of them, all the guys in the government there.
Oh, you have any names?
Well, they got Comey, and they got Hillary, and they got, I don't remember all the names. No, but it's in all those departments. They've been there for years, and they're all woke now, and they're crazy. And he's rooting them out.
Let me ask you this. Do you know what a tariff is and who pays it?
Well, I don't know specifically what it means, but I have an idea, yes.
Do you think tariffs are paid by countries, or do you think tariffs are paid by American importers and eventually you and me, the consumer?
Oh, good Lord. I don't know who pays for a tariff, but I know that if he thinks that's what's right to save the economy, then that's the right thing to do. I'm perfectly fine with it.
You know, Elon Musk this week called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. Do you agree with that?
Well, is he talking about, like I'm counting on Social Security in 8 years and Medicare?
He's talking about the program that you put your money in for all the years that you've been working and which you are entitled to get back in return when you retire. And he called it a Ponzi scheme. You don't have an issue with that?
Well, I don't know what Ponzi is. I thought it was something you have in a Chinese restaurant.
Apparently so. All right, Colton, we'll chat with you again next time. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That was my actor pal, Nathan Dean, out in Los Angeles. We'll chat with Colton and Nathan next time. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.